If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of 3. Join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth and postnatal recovery, helping you have a wonderful pregnancy and afterbirth experience. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Today on the show, I am speaking to the lovely Bridget Murphy from the Truest You. Bridget is a health coach and meditation teacher who helps women create healthier habits so they can manage their stress and anxiety and avoid burning out. She's all about weaving in simple changes that don't add overwhelm so women can keep moving forward and start feeling more like themselves. Bridget works with women one-on-one and within her online coaching membership, the Truest You Collective. In today's show, we will be discussing 5 reasons why mindfulness is useful during pregnancy and 5 ways to stay mindful during pregnancy. I have to say, I left this chat feeling so relaxed and focused, and I'm not the one who has previously been into mindfulness. But Bridget is a wealth of information and she has the most amazing, calming aura about her. But before we do jump into this amazing episode, I just want to let you know that this episode is sponsored by my free 7-day trial of Fitness Mama. In this 7-day trial, you'll be able to try one of our weekly live Pilates classes, do as many on-demand classes as you'd like, binge listen to guest expert speakers, discussing topics including hypnobirthing, induction, mindset, and more. And there are also heaps of Q&A sessions with myself on all sorts of topics, such as abdominal muscle separation, pregnancy-related pelvic pain, cesarean scar massage, mastitis, and more. All you need to do is head to www.fitnessmama.com/free. Right, let's get into the show. Thank you, Bridget, for joining us today.
Thank you, Kath, for having me.
Lovely. So today we're going to chat about reasons why mindfulness is so important during pregnancy. We were going to discuss 5 specific reasons why mindfulness is so important during pregnancy. And I know during this time, this day and age especially, I thought this was a very great conversation to have with you.
It is. Now more than ever, I think we need to really tap into this mindfulness. And it's something that I think we complicate for ourselves when we hear the term mindfulness, or we think that we have to be doing something really luxurious or that takes a long period of time. But actually it's about simplifying things and bringing things back to basics, essentially. So just to begin, so mindfulness is essentially to be present in the moment and to pay attention on purpose without judgment. And so that without judgment is where a lot of people find it challenging, because if you're tuning into how your body's feeling and you're like, oh, that's sore, that's aching, especially during pregnancy, I'm not feeling well, then you sort of like, what's the point? It's making me feel worse tuning in. So I can go through reasons why and then give you some tips and tricks later on. But I think what we need to understand too is that mindfulness isn't just meditation. I know there's this big misconception that people are like, oh, I'm not good at meditation, so I'm not really doing anything. But meditation is more formal and structured, whereas mindfulness, you can be weaving things in throughout your whole day that you don't necessarily have to stop for if you don't want to.
That was definitely my perception years ago, when I first started hearing the word mindfulness, I'd sort of tune out a little bit because I just thought that's not for me. But the more I know, the more I want to know.
And you see the benefits for yourself too, so it motivates you to keep going. But I think if it's something that's really new and unfamiliar, we're like, oh, it's a bit airy-fairy. And that's where a lot of people do tune out, because they're like, yeah, like you said, it's not for me. I don't want to do that. And if you can't see the benefit, it's like anything, it's really hard to practice it.
So 5 reasons. Let's go into it.
5 reasons. It was really hard for me to try and narrow down 5 reasons that I would talk about, but I'll run you through some. So one of the biggest ones is to calm your nervous system, and especially during pregnancy, considering that you're carrying a baby, this is so important too. So sort of switching off from that fight or flight mode and into rest and digest. And even if you think of that, so that fight or flight to rest and digest, it instantly makes you feel calmer to be like, oh yeah, I'd prefer to be in that state. And I think with how much is happening, and for pregnant women or people who are thinking about conceiving, even afterwards, there's so much racing through your mind, so much you're trying to do, rushing through things, that your nervous system is just getting loaded and loaded and loaded every single day. So we just need little things to bring ourselves back. So it's a perfect way to do that. And it can help reduce stress and overwhelm, and also that rumination. I'm not sure about you, Kath, but those thoughts that just go round and round and round in your head. Some people say it's like a washing machine and it's on a spin cycle, and those thoughts just go round and round. Especially too when we stop or we pause, people notice that they're like, oh, I'm feeling really stressed or I'm feeling really overwhelmed, and those thoughts just start racing. And that's where mindfulness is such a useful tool to help avoid getting to that point, but also help to manage it when you're in the thick of it.
And help to recognise it as well.
Yeah, exactly. So self-awareness is a huge part of mindfulness, letting yourself actually tune into how you're feeling on a physical, mental and emotional level. A huge part is to be present and appreciate the moment you're in, which again sort of sounds really airy-fairy because we hear these terms, but if you're actually present in the moment that you're in, your mind isn't thinking about, tomorrow or even an hour's time. It's not jumping back into yesterday. And I think too, during pregnancy, that's so important because, yes, of course, you want to be looking forward to, the months ahead and how you're feeling and what you'll have in that time. But also you want to be enjoying the moment you're in. Otherwise, you might get to that, say, 6-month mark and you're like, geez, where did those months go? Those symptoms might be really obvious and you're like, oh, I'm so glad they've passed. But you might not really think of that initial period and have known that you've appreciated that time. And some of the pregnant women that I do work with, they're like, I feel like I just wish that time away.
Well, it's the same like when you're pregnant and when you've got kids, you're always thinking about the next meal or the next thing you need to get ready for them, or always thinking forward. So I think that is such a good tip that you just said, to try to bring yourself back to the present, because it is so easy to think, oh, once the kids are in bed asleep, then I can do X, Y, and Z. So,
and then while the kids are in bed asleep and you're doing X, Y, and Z, you're still not present on you and how you're feeling and what you need in that moment. And I am a realistic person. Like, I know not all the time you're going to be sitting there like, how am I feeling? Oh, I'm not going to think forwards or backwards. Like, we're human. Everybody does it. But it's just giving yourself pockets of time throughout the day where you let yourself just be fully in that moment. And when people do, through the birthing process and then they see their baby, that is the ultimate mindful moment, because nothing else has got your attention in that time.
Yeah, that's so true. You'll never forget that moment either, will you? That will just always be with you, the first time you hold your baby.
So I think even if that's helpful for you to think about, that is mindfulness for people that have had children before, to think of that moment. Yes, it won't be, I think everyday things won't be as special as that moment, but if you know that feeling within yourself, then you can call on that. So to be present in the moment. Then mindfulness also increases kindness, acceptance and compassion, not only for others but for yourself, which I think is so important, because a lot of us are so great at giving out that kindness, of being compassionate for others, having that empathy, but then for ourselves, we're so hard on ourselves. And I use like an analogy about like somebody walking down the street, they've got 2 shopping bags and their bags split open. You wouldn't just stand there and berate that person and be like, oh, look at you, I can't believe you've done that. You should have known that. And we wouldn't do that to somebody else. Well, I hope people wouldn't. But it's like we do that to ourselves. We say, why am I doing this wrong? Why do I look like that? Why am I feeling like that? And we just constantly put this pressure on ourselves to be better, to be more, or to push things to the side. So I think to have that kindness, that acceptance I think during pregnancy too, acceptance is such an important thing to have for yourself, because you're going through so many changes, and we think of those changes more so on a physical level, but mentally and emotionally too. So you will change and things will change. So having acceptance around that. So that's another reason. Then the final one, it's a really big one, because if you've got that kindness and compassion for yourself too, we become like a mirror. So then you'll have more of it for other people as well. The final one is to let your mind and body catch up. which is such a big one. It's like giving yourself a little bit of a circuit breaker and breaking that loop. I know lots of us feel like we're sort of like going round and round constantly, sort of that feeling of living on autopilot where you're just going from one thing to the next. And like you said before, Kath, thinking about what you can do once the kids are in bed, and it's like that constant going around hamster on a wheel. This just lets you slow down. And if, for people listening, if they've done yoga or anything where you sort of just get on the floor and you're like, you give yourself a chance for your body and mind to catch up. And you can do this again in other simple ways that can take like 10, 20 seconds just for you to be like, oh, how is my mind feeling? How's my body feeling? What can I do to sort of bring them back together so your mind's not, 2 hours into the future and your body's still hanging, that feeling of like, oh, I'd like to be back in bed again.
And that's very similar to being present in the moment, isn't it? But it's thinking about it in a different way. I love it.
Yep. 100%. So being present is tuning into all of those things. But if we think of it as letting our mind and body catch up, it just, I guess, pushes us to do it even more because we're like, oh, that's the reason why. A lot of the time we don't know, if we haven't done things like this before, we don't know the why. So there's, like I said at the start, no motivation to start or continue it. Yeah, so that'd be my top 5.
What was the first one again?
So to calm your nervous system. Switch off that fight or flight and get into that rest and digest.
Great. And then the second one was be present in the moment.
And reduce stress and overwhelm. Increase the kindness, acceptance and compassion for yourself and others. And then the last one, similar to being present, but let your mind and body catch up.
So that's 5 reasons why mindfulness can be so important during pregnancy. So let's get straight into how do we do it? 5 ways to stay mindful during pregnancy and postpartum. We should include that early newborn stage too. I'm sure it all overlaps.
And probably even more important in that postpartum period because everything's new. So much has changed during that transition period. Your mind is focused on your baby in that time. And that's when a lot of people feel like the women I work with, they're like, I feel like I just lost myself in that time. If you're giving yourself that time, like we said, for those 5 reasons, the 5 benefits, if you're giving yourself that time to be like, oh, how am I feeling? What do I need? If you're giving moments throughout the day for that, you'll be able to check in with yourself before you're like 4 months down the track and you're like, whew, that was a lot.
Absolutely, because as you said, there's not only all the changes that are happening in your household and, parenting roles and all that sort of thing. Then you've got all the hormonal changes to put into the mix. So there's just so many changes in that early newborn period. So that's fantastic. So what's number 1?
So before I dive in, I just thought it's important for me to say to start small. With like anything, a lot of the people I work with are all or nothing people. So they're like, if I can't do it fully, I won't bother. But just something is better than nothing is what I try and remind people. So just start small. If mindfulness is new to you and it's not something that you've been weaving in for a while, start off with sort of something that is more structured. And with that, it might just be linking a mindfulness tool to a habit that you already have. So while you're brushing your teeth, you can do one of the things I'm talking about, or, when you're driving and you're at a red light, or when you're feeding your baby. So just trying to link it with a habit that you already have so it's easier for you to stick at. Because if it's something that you've been doing for a while, you'll be able to weave these things in. So the idea is that you have things that are doable, that are realistic, that you can just pull on or from like a toolbox whenever you feel that you need them most. So the first thing I would say is when in doubt, come back to breath. And it sounds so simple. We've heard it millions of times and we're like, great, yeah, but we take like over 20,000 breaths a day. And if we think of how many conscious breaths we take, of how we're like, oh, am I deep breathing? A lot of us don't tune into that. So even if you say, right, each time I pick up my phone, I'll take a deep breath. Or it might be each time my baby cries, I'll take a deep breath. Because that's probably something that you wouldn't think of doing when you hear the baby cry. That's a moment where you might be tense, frustrated, losing patience in that moment. So just come back to breath. And the easiest way to calm the nervous system with the breath is to extend your exhale. So you might breathe in for 4, breathe out for 6. It doesn't need to be a long period of time, but just that even one deep breath. If you can do more, that's ideal, obviously. You can check in and see where the breath is in your body. Notice if you're breathing into your chest, and even just putting a hand on your chest and one on your belly just to be like, oh, where is my breath going? So a lot of us shallow breathe, and I'm sure you've done it, Kath. I do it. I still do it. And then we get that tension in the shoulders, that tightness in the chest, and especially for new mums who already have, and you would see this all the time, that tension in their shoulders and everything from carrying the baby, leaning over, not sitting properly posturally. I think that breath, just inviting that in to open things up, is so important.
That's just so linked with what I teach my mums in the membership as well, because when we hold our body tension, as you said, often you don't breathe, and then before you know it, you've got tension in your neck and shoulders, but not just that, also pelvic floor muscle tension. A lot of it can be relieved with nice deep belly breaths, and we do tend to hold, well, some women do have quite overactive pelvic floor, which that's a whole topic for another day, which we won't go into, but absolutely trying to take it back to that deep breathing is great for the body, mind and spirit, soul.
And it's something that we have access to all the time. So we've really got no excuse. It's just do it in a way that works for you. On the hour, when you're brushing your teeth is hard, while you're waiting, for the kettle to boil, weave it in a way that works for you. So that's tip number one. When in doubt, come back to your breath. You don't need anything to do that.
I have to admit that's my go-to when my toddler is having a meltdown, and my older kids know, they say, watch out, Mum's taking deep breaths.
But I think it's so important too, Kath, when you do have children, to be modelling that. So then they're seeing that behaviour in what you're choosing to do, rather than, I guess, switching straight to that reaction mode, which then guilt follows that. The second thing would be to prioritise. So a lot of us have so much we know we want to do, that we have to do, that we should be doing, that we lose focus of what we need to be doing or want to be doing in the present moment. So again, we're sitting down to do something, or we're rushing around doing things, and we're not really present on that one thing at all, because we're thinking, I've still got to do X, Y, and Z. I've only crossed one thing off my list today and it's already lunchtime. But I think focus on what's most important to you. And this is what I do a lot inside my membership and with my clients, is say, write down the 5 things that are most important to you. And people are like, oh, that's hard. But if you write down those people and things, then they can help inform what you're saying yes and no to. And there will be exceptions, but if you use that as sort of like an anchor to keep coming back to being like, oh yeah, actually that's a later thing, not right now, will just help you to be like, okay, I can do this one thing and I can do it properly right now. And that one thing might be just focusing on yourself without that guilt of 1,000 things that need to be done.
Is that similar along the lines of every morning writing a to-do list? If there's only 2 or 3 things you're going to achieve that day, or is it a bit different?
So I'd say have those core priorities. It might be people, so family members, your partner, whoever that is, but also prioritise what's important to you, especially at the time that you're in. So whether you are pregnant or whether it is postpartum period, your priorities will change. So checking in on them, you might just do it on a monthly basis, just have a list of 5 things, but then you can break it down even further and prioritise on a daily basis. And a tool that I like to use for that is a now, next, later list. Because if we have this whole to-do list for a day, it can still be hard to know where to channel our time first. And as humans, we jump to the fiddly, fluffy bits first and leave the hard bits to later when we don't have that, I guess, capacity to actually focus on them. So if you say, okay, now, and that might be when you're starting work or when you're starting your day, whatever it is, I'll focus on this. Next, I'll do this. Later, I'll do that. And I think even across motherhood, that's a great thing to have in mind, just to use, even if you're not writing it down, just to have in your mind to break up tasks or to break up the day.
I love it. That simplifies the massive list of things in, I guess, every mother's mind. So to just think now, next and later is so helpful.
So the third thing would be to tune in to sensations within the body. Now, I know there's times during pregnancy where you probably don't want to tune into how it's feeling because you're trying to block out those sensations or the pain or how you're feeling. But I think it's important to tune in not only to areas of tension and where it's not feeling at ease, but also welcome in and be like, oh, that feels really free and open and I am feeling ease there. So this is where body scan meditations can be really helpful. especially if you're a person who notices that your mind wanders really easily if you're trying to do this and bring this awareness in yourself. So if you do a body scan meditation, it'll just take you from like head to toe, scanning the whole body. And I think that's really important, especially if you notice that you are sort of on autopilot, like we spoke about, just to give yourself even like 2 minutes or 5 minutes just to scan the body and notice how you're feeling. Because we can, and I'm sure, Kath, you've seen this and spoken to lots of women about it, we can just find that one niggle and just focus on it. There's nothing that can take us away. Like lower back really hurts. Like we just keep telling ourselves that. It's not that we're wanting to push that pain away and ignore it, but it's also, okay, where is my body feeling open and free? It takes that focus solely away from that, I guess you could say, pain point. You can also do it, so if you're linking this to something else that you do on a daily basis, you can do that while you're in the shower and just notice how you're feeling in the shower, notice where the water's hitting in the shower on your body. Like, it doesn't have to be a standalone practice if you don't want it to be.
This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months, yes, that's 9 months, they also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybeeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply. And that's a great one to do if you're having trouble going to sleep. I think that's a lovely one to do when you're in bed, your mind's racing, and to do that body scan before you go to sleep. I find that really useful.
Yeah, so helpful. And again, it helps your body and mind catch up to one another. Number 4 is notice the good. Now, with gratitude, whatever you want to call it, I think it's really important though for me to say first is that being grateful doesn't mean that you're dismissing what isn't working well. You don't want to just pretend, especially in the postpartum period, you don't want to just pretend that everything's fine. And I think people call it toxic positivity. You don't want to just be like, everything's great, everything's going well, I feel fine, my body's, bouncing back, and just, you don't want to feel like you have to put on a facade. But I think if you can notice the good within yourself while still being honest about what isn't going so well or areas that you are struggling with, if you can just say, okay, well, today, I really enjoyed, or I'm proud of myself for, or the highlight of my day was, or I'm looking forward to. Like, if you just even have a few of those prompts just for you to come back to. And some people even go as far as like creating like a gratitude jar or a bowl for their whole household to do. So if you've got children especially, it's a nice way to sort of close out the day. And if they're younger children, they can draw.
Yes, for our first day of homeschooling, that's what my 2 older girls had to do, is create a gratitude jar. And the amount of time they spent decorating and the lack of time they spent writing was great. But it was really nice to see that they do start doing that at school right from prep, or at our school, mindfulness and gratitude.
And it's such an important tool to teach. Like, as a primary school teacher I was in the past, I would always try and end the day with a moment of gratitude. So even if the children were lining up, what was the highlight of your day? You'd go down the line. Because if that's how they're finishing their day, that's what they remember. And the same with us. If we're, sitting down to eat dinner and we're sharing the highlight of our day, and you can share the highlight and a challenge as well, that's fine. Or if you're jumping into bed and you're just thinking about it to yourself, that's how you're closing off your day. So I think it's really important. And it might be even on those, early morning feeds when you're up and you're sitting on your own, just even to be like, oh, okay, what am I enjoying about this moment?
Again, it's simple but effective.
Yep. And I think a lot of mindfulness tools and techniques are really simple, but we overcomplicate them in our mind, and that's what makes us avoid them or put them off or not even try them in the first place. So then the final one is a brain dump. Now, this is especially helpful when you feel like things are just getting a little bit too much, where you don't have that clarity, or where you feel like that fog is just taking over and you can't work out what to do next. All you do is get a piece of paper, scrap paper. It doesn't have to be in a nice journal. If it is, that's fine. And just start writing everything down. If you find that you have that block, you just write, I don't know what to write. Then you'll just notice it pour out. Now, this doesn't have to make sense. If somebody picked it up, they probably wouldn't make any sense of it. And they'd be like, whoa, that's what's going through their mind right now. But it's just getting all of those thoughts that are racing around in your mind out on paper. So then it relieves a bit of that weight and the pressure and that stress and overwhelm. You can tear it up, screw it up, throw it away. And even that in itself, obviously it doesn't make everything just go away. It'd be nice some days if we can do that. But it's just like, okay, you've given yourself that time and space to process a little bit of what's happening and to maybe notice and even an underlying theme of why. I think they're the top 5. There was one sneaky one, if I can just throw it in. And I'm sure like lots of new mums or mums-to-be have done some of this if they've done classes, but affirmations. And again, it's one of those things that sometimes people can hear and they're like, oh, airy-fairy, yeah, whatever. But I think even just to bring yourself into the moment, if you're saying, I am here now, I'm present, I'm noticing the good in this moment, like it can be really simple. But if you're coming back to those things often, just as again, like an anchor to keep pulling you back. That's my sneaky 6th one.
Great. Can I summarise them quickly just to make sure I've got them all clear? So the first one, take some deep breaths, become mindful in your breathing, and deep breaths, just amazing for the body, mind and spirit. Belly breaths as well. Secondly, prioritise. So I love the now, next, later that you talk about. So instead of thinking about all the million priorities you've got on in the day, just think about the 3 top priorities. Now,
yep. And Kath, sorry, can I throw something else in there that I don't think I mentioned before? Is that when you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And often that no that you're saying to something else, you're saying no to yourself because you want to get everything done. So just keep that in your mind too. By saying yes to this, what am I saying no to? And that might help you with what you're choosing to channel your time and energy into as well.
So it's going back to just doing one thing at a time. You have to say no to something.
And it's a practice. You'll have to keep doing it thousands of times before it becomes more natural to you. It's just pulling yourself up on it and being like, no, I'll just focus on this. No, I'll just do this, and do it over and over until your default becomes sort of focusing on one thing.
I feel like already I'm feeling calmer. I have more clarity what's happening today. Okay, the third one you mentioned was tune into areas of tension, where is our body feeling open and free, and it helps us when we are on autopilot. The 4th is all about gratefulness, discussing the things you enjoyed that day perhaps. The 5th one is the good old brain dump. I love that. 6 is affirmations. So just a few simple sentences like, I am here now, I am present.
Yeah, positive language in the present moment. We don't want to be saying things like, I am not, I will not, I don't. Because I think we jump to those things. So I am statements work really well.
Yeah, okay. Amazing. Thank you. I hope that has helped others also feel a bit calmer and clearer in their thoughts, and even if there's just one of those small things to take away. So instead of all 6, if you just choose one and try to do it today or now or wherever you are.
Yep. Start small, focus on one thing and weave them in, and different things will work for you at different times too. So don't feel like you have to, every time you pick up your phone, take 3 deep breaths for like years. Eventually you'll focus on your breath, or something else might work for you. So don't feel like you have to be really rigid in it either, because it's sort of counterproductive then.
So Bridget, how can people find you?
So they can find me on Instagram more than Facebook at The Truest You. If you are on Facebook, at the Truest You Health Coaching, on my website, thetruestyou.com.au, and there you'll also find information about my membership. So Kath and I did build ours alongside each other, sort of at the same time, and it's called the Truest You Collective, and everything is broken down into simple, easy to follow steps for you to help to manage your stress and anxiety, reduce overwhelm, and avoid burning out.
And you've got a free class for everyone, don't you?
I do. So in that free class, I take you through 5 steps to switch off living on autopilot and step into that alignment with what you really, truly want and who you are. So you can access that via my website, so thetruestyou.com.au/free.
Amazing. Thank you very much for joining me today, Bridget. It was so lovely to chat.
Thank you. Lovely to chat with you too.
And before we sign off, please remember my team and I will also be putting together the show notes for this episode with all the links for how to connect with Bridget from the Truest You and how to access the free 7-day trial at fitnessmama.com/podcast. Thanks for listening to the Fitness Mama podcast, brought to you by the Fitness Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at Fitness Mama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer, materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. I'll see you soon.